I'm Professor Haim Bresheeth, based at SOAS, and also one of the founders of the Jewish Network for Palestine, which is an anti-Zionist organization supporting the rights of the Palestinians in Britain, and is a sister organization of JVP in the United States. Well, I don't know any other life. all my adult life were active as an anti-Zionist. So to me, it's just the same. But what changed is the environment around us. We were very few in the past. Now we include people from very varied backgrounds, Jews, Christians, Muslims, seculars and religious people, white and black, people from all over the world are now seeing the case for supporting Palestine and for the end of Zionism in the way that in my lifetime I have never seen before. Young people don't need to be told what's wrong with Zionism, they understand it. They understand it because of social media, despite the fact that the BBC and The Guardian and all the right-wing papers and the terrible television provision that we have in this country. The mainstream media is on the side of Israel, is on the side of Zionism, is on the side of the genocide, as is the government, as are all the governments in the West. This genocide is a genocide by the West. Israel is the tool of the West, as well as Ukraine is the tool of America. These things are clear to young people because they don't actually listen to the BBC, they don't read The Guardian in the way that people once had. What has changed is the environment we operate in. There is a much larger audience all over the world that come new to this action of supporting Palestine, which I think is excellent. In the US, there are now hundreds of thousands of young Jews who are supporting Palestine. This has never happened before. It hasn't yet happened in this country, but I think, we are normally a few years behind the United States in, progressive movements. So I think it will come. A lot of the action in the streets is by very large number of Muslim families, where the children are involved in the demos, etc. I think this is all great. So it's not just activists like myself and you who are actually going into the streets. People from all walks of life, from the top to the bottom, from right to left, are now supporting Palestine. It's become the iconic case against colonialism. It's an iconic case against Islamophobia. That's very important. So I think that what we see is the moment that Palestine is turned into what South Africa once was, the blacks of South Africa. The ANC was a symbol of liberation. Now Palestine, not just Gaza, but the whole of Palestine. Of course, Gaza is the focus of this genocide, but the Israelis will do the same thing in other parts of Palestine, and actually are doing. So I think that's the change that I can describe. The change is that we have for many years worked without a system around us. We were isolated. Different people were acting, sometimes together, but we didn't have hundreds of millions acting in the street. That's the change I can see. It's complicated. I can remember, I never was a Zionist as such, but I wasn't active politically. I didn't act on my understandings or beliefs. I felt uneasy, and the reason for that are complex. My family is from Poland. Both my parents were in Auschwitz during the war. They survived, but actually were sent by the Nazis from Auschwitz when they closed Auschwitz to 2 other terrible camps. So they suffered quite a lot. They lost everything. And I was born in a refugee camp. I think that really shapes your life in a sense. And we grew up, I grew up in a Palestinian home in Jabalia, in the south of Jaffa, because the whole Jabalia, which after became Jabalia because the people of Jabalia went to Gaza. Well, they didn't go, they were expelled forcibly. So I grew up in this conflict, I'm part of that conflict. My life is an extension of the conflict. Around me there were Palestinian children, same age as me. They spoke Arabic and they were survivors of the Nakba. And I spoke Yiddish and Arabic and Hebrew, and I was son of survivors of the Holocaust. So the whole of this environment were survivors. And there was no animosity. So of course, I didn't grow up in the same way that most Israelis did. They didn't have any contact with Arab children or Arab families and so on. And because I knew that they are like me, I never felt animosity towards them, and they didn't feel animosity towards me. So I think that probably is an explanation why I didn't have to undo a Zionist trend in myself. But I lived in a Zionist country. I knew how powerful Zionism is on the mind of young people, and I saw what it did to my friends. And when I came to Britain, because I felt free of the daily Zionism, if you want, in Israel, I was open, and within a short time I joined a anti-Zionist group called Matzpen, and became active. So my story, unfortunately, is not typical. If it was typical, I think we'll have many more anti-Zionists. It's very difficult if you grew up in a Zionist family to actually move to the opposite position. I appreciate the difficulties, but I think today, when you see what Zionism is and does, then I think anyone that is going on supporting this regime and its crimes becomes, basically part of the crime. They become criminal in supporting this. So I think people have to take responsibility about their political actions. Well, first of all, the 7th of October is a cleavage point. Nothing will ever be the same again. And this is obviously clear to everyone, but it's still important to remember that this is where something happened that hasn't happened before. How many times do people that are caged, like the people of Gaza, manage to break the doors of the cage and come out and attack one of the most powerful armies? It is supposedly the 4th strongest army in the world. People with nothing, with light arms in their hands, are now attacking the tanks, the jets, the technology of the 21st century of one of the richest nations on earth, supported by the Western Bloc with more money than any other country, with more arms, with more diplomatic support. How many times did we see such a breakout from jail by people with nothing at all, and who managed to hurt that army, to hurt their occupiers, to cause them damage militarily and morally in the way that the attack by Hamas and Jihad has managed. So I think what happened is that The Palestinian resistance has managed to harm the occupation in a way that no other richer, bigger Arab country has done since 1948. Think about it, you know. The shock that the attack on the 7th has caused Israel is very valuable, though, of course, it created, in a sense, what has followed, which is the genocide. But the genocide would have happened otherwise, yeah? It was planned, and it was always meant to happen. This is the plan of Zionism, is to use ethnic cleansing, genocide, forced expulsions, and every other way of weakening the Palestinians. This is not new. This has started even before 1948. So what is important to remember that what we now see is a resistance to colonialism, which we haven't seen in the Third World for many, many decades, probably since Vietnam. So this is a meaningful point of changing the narrative from the narrative of victimhood to the narrative of liberation, of anti-colonialism. Now, it's not an accident that a lot of people in the global South are supporting Palestine lock, stock, and barrel, because they understand that this is their game, this is their aim, this is the objective, you know, defeating Western capitalism and Western anti-democracy. Yeah, this is, you know, the West is anti-democratic, is very important to them. Its stranglehold over the whole world, over its politics, over its money supply, over its, you know, arms industry, you know, this stranglehold the West has about the world has to be broken. And it will be broken. It will be broken by, you know, developments in the global South and East. We see that. We see the rise of BRICS, etc. All those things are part of the change. The West is declining. Israel, which is part of the West, is an agent of the West, is a creature of the West, is not only declining, but I think we see the beginning of the end of Zionism, of this colonial project. It's going to be painful to look at, because every empire, even a mini empire like Israel, is going to cause a lot of pain, and it is causing a lot of pain, of course. But you can't defeat colonialism without pain. You know, the Algerians had to fight and lose 1.5 million people against France. Think about the other colonial powers that refused to end the colonization in Vietnam, refused to end the colonization in South Africa. You know, all these are very painful struggles. They are costly struggles in life and in values, but they must take place. And this is history. So we are now seeing history on the move, not for the first time in our lifetime, but in a big way. And that's the only thing that I think is positive. What is happening is terrible. It's terrible to see, you know, probably 15,000 children are already dead in those 3 months. This has never happened. In all the wars in the last decades, nobody has managed to create such a massive crime of killing 15,000 children without anything happening, you know, without any government actually coming and saying, until South Africa did it, this is genocide and we have to stop it. No, they're actually feeding it, they're arming it, they're supporting it politically, diplomatically. This is a terrible thing to see. So the cost of this decolonization struggle against Israel is going to be very high, and the Palestinians are bearing the brunt of it. But I think now other countries are joining South Africa in this case of not just what we want, of course, is not a ceasefire. A ceasefire is nothing, because a ceasefire, it means that the fire will start again. No, we want the end of the Zionist project and a new Palestine where Jews, Christians and Muslims can live like they did in Al-Andalus, like they lived in Palestine, like they lived in the Ottoman Empire, like they lived in South Africa, like they lived under the Mughals, like they lived in most of North Africa and the Middle East, without genocide, without anti-Semitism or Islamophobia, without pogroms, without Holocaust. They lived together. And I think that's what we want. And I think that's what we will get if we are wise, if we are looking at the mistakes made in South Africa, mistakes made in Ireland, mistakes made in a number of conflicts which are important for us, like in Algeria. If we learn from those mistakes, we can create in the Middle East opposition to Western uncivilization. Yeah? There is a Western uncivilization of war, of rampant capitalism, exploitation. It destroys people, it destroys the planet, it destroys our value. Think about, this genocide, because it is not acted upon, but because it is actually helped and abetted, is actually undermining international law. So I think the stakes are very high here. This is not just for Palestine that we're fighting, but we're fighting for a new Middle East, the end of Islamophobia as a policy and as an action by the West, the end of apartheid in Palestine, and for a kind of convivencia, living together like we always did in the Middle East. And we can do it, because for hundreds of years, we did it. And we couldn't do it in Europe, but we did it, of course, in Al-Andalus. People of the Middle East are used to living together. They liked it. They created cultures which affected every one of us to this day. So yes, I think we have a lot to look forward to beyond the pain which is obvious. If it was just the pain, we would not be able to actually go to the other end of this. So we've got to think about the long term. Ceasefire means nothing to me. I want justice, peace, and the end of oppression in the whole of the Middle East. And I think it is attainable.
Do you think you'll see it in your lifetime?
Well, I definitely will need to live a long time, but I intend to work for it like we all do, as long as I live. And I think that with a bit of luck, we will start seeing the changes in the next few years. I don't know how fast it will move. I'm not able to look into the future, but what I can see is that young people everywhere are changing. They are the future. They will be the force that will write the narrative and will write the reality of the future. And I'm optimistic in that aspect alone. I'm not optimistic about what will happen to the Palestinians in the short term, because the whole West is united against Palestine, because they understand that Palestine holds the key to their decline. It becomes a symbol of the West's declines. Its values are in decline because they're supporting genocide. This is a simple case. I don't think that I expected more from the West. I'm sorry to say that, I didn't have any hopes that the West can act humanly and morally in the way that it should, of course. No, I didn't have those hopes. I'm old enough to have seen. I was born a year after the Second World War in a refugee camp. I've seen millions of refugees created by the West. I've seen the West destroy so many societies in my lifetime. Destroy, not harm only, but destroy societies. What has happened in Iraq, you know, one of the oldest cultures on this earth? What has happened to Syria, another old culture where, you know, all the monotheistic religions are coming from that region? The fact that we write an alphabet comes from the Middle East. The fact that we speak languages which are all sisters. Astronomy, mathematics, physics, poetry, you know, all our cultures have started in this region between Iraq and Egypt. So the West has destroyed this area, country by country, region by region, regime by regime, were basically taken out and replaced by chaos. So no, I don't think that this is new. Unfortunately, it's not new. What is new is that now it's all on our telephones. Yeah? Every day we live with genocide. Every day we go to sleep with genocide. And this is normalized, and this is supposedly the new reality that we have to live with. I refuse to live with genocide. I'm sure you do. I'm sure all the people that I know also refuse to live with it. Young people everywhere refuse to live with it. So I did not expect this level of brutality, because who did, you know? There is a very famous story when the leader of Hezbollah was asked after 2006, did you know that Israel was going to destroy the south of Lebanon because of 6 soldiers that you have killed at the border? He said, do you think if we knew about that, we would do this? You know, who could think that a normal world would allow a destruction of a country because of this action, you know? It's totally, unrealistic to even imagine that. We didn't imagine that, and if we did, we wouldn't do it. So I think this is what has happened. What has happened is that anything is imaginable. Anything can happen. Things that we are not able to imagine can happen, and they become the norm. I think that's new. That didn't exist since the Second World War, and the fact that now it is existing and is normalized is terrifying. Well, you said that Israel is a creation of international law. I think Israel is a creation of international chaos. In 1948, when the UN, the 2-year-old UN, the baby UN, created Israel, it made its first and massive mistake. It allowed a group of people supported by Western regimes to take over a third world country from its citizens, from its indigenous population, totally unjustly. Therefore, I don't think that international law, if we want to call that an action of international law, is about justice. If it was about justice, it wouldn't do that. So international law has a very difficult history, and history of injustices, and the same happened in India, and the same happened in Cyprus, and so on. We can go into this, but the result will always be the same. International law did not help the people without power. It only helped the powerful. That's a bad start for a legal system, you know. So, but the people without power, who are the majority of us, who are the majority of people in this country, have not a lot of entries into solutions of their problems. And one of the entries at the moment is ICJ. And ICJ was created with very good intentions, as you hinted at the question. So the idea was to create a court, an international court, for the first time, can bring regimes who are war criminal involved, who are, enacting crimes against humanity, to bring them to book, to make sure that they are punished, that they are monitored, that there is a law that stops them from genocide, for example. However, of course, we know from the situation at the ICC, which is a much later creature of the West. I mean, the ICC is totally of the West, while the ICJ was a creature of the very young and energetic, but also mistakenly controlled by the West in 1948. So the ideas were very influenced by the terrible thing that happened, the death of more than 100 million in the Second World War. But during the years, the chair of the ICJ is an American woman with very doubtful, record. It took a week to bring Russia, when it attacked Ukraine, if we can describe it like this, because I would describe it much more complicatedly. But it took a week for the international community, so-called, to act with sanctions against this attack. Here we are, almost 4 months after the 7th of October, nothing has happened. So we have to be realistic. These people are not radicals, these people are not activists like the young lawyers that spoke for South Africa. I mean, they were amazing. I mean, have you seen a theater like that, which is so gripping? This is the theater of our life. But unfortunately, the audience of that theater are not just the millions that don't have the power, or the billions, but the 15 who do. And that little audience is with the power, and they come from a lot of powerful countries. I think that the pressure on those 15 people is enormous already. And Israel did not even relate to the accusations. They never talked about what they do. They only talked about what happened on the 7th of October. Now, on the 7th of October, all kinds of things happened, some of them not very happy. But what happened if you describe it in an outline, is an act of resistance against colonization of Palestine. That's what happened. And in war, and in especially anti-colonial war, things will happen. Things that sometimes we don't fully support, but what I support is I support the liberation from Zionism. And I think this is what this is about. So if they were thinking like us, that we need to liberate people, even not just the Palestinians from Zionism, but to liberate the Jews from Zionism. We have to liberate the Jews of Israel and the Jews of the world from a racist regime like Israel. We have to have a regime of change that allows people to live together.